Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Boren Awards and Foreign Language and Area Studies FLAS Fellowships. The information session has been jointly organized with the Global Education Office. And my name is Lenny Ureña Valerio, and I'm the Associate Director for Program Development in the Latin American and Iberian Institute. I am also the FLAS Coordinator for the Institute. And for those of you who don't know, the Latin American Iberian Institute at the University of New Mexico promotes and supports interdisciplinary teaching, research, and meaningful public engagement to advance the production and dissemination of knowledge about Latin America and Iberia. Latin America is designated as one of 7 priority areas of research for our university, and we proudly contribute to both universities' intellectual community as well as global discourse through programming. And I'd like to take a moment now to recognize the traditional homelands of the Pueblo of Sandia, on which UNM sits. The original peoples of New Mexico, Pueblo, Navajo, and Apache have deep connections to the land and have made significant contributions to the broader community statewide. We honor the land itself and those who remain stewards of this land throughout the generations, and also acknowledge our committed relationship to Indigenous peoples. And now I'm pleased to welcome Michael Saffel, who is Boren Awards Program Specialist in the Institute of International Education, and he will start this event by giving us a presentation on the Boren Awards.
Thank you very much. So the Boren Award is a program that is funded by the U.S. government. We are actually funded by the Department of Defense. Our program was created in the 90s to basically fill in a hole where we saw a lack of folks studying abroad in general, but also studying abroad in places like Eastern Europe, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, Africa. So the Boren was created basically to take those students who were studying abroad in, let's say, Germany or Italy or France, and say, hey, let us move you over a little bit. Why don't you try Hungary? Why don't you try Romania? Why don't you try, Kazakhstan, Japan, things like that, Brazil. So that is where this kind of program came up with, and the government's like, all right, so what is the main reason why students aren't studying abroad? Financial is usually the #1 reason given by students. So the government has tried many programs, a lot through the Department of State, but in DoD, we've been doing this program for about 29 years. The Boren Award is focused more on national security. It's also a program that has a component, what we call the service agreement. So unlike most of the awards you will hear about, FLAS, Critical Language Scholarship, Gilman Award if you're a Pell Grantee, the Fulbright, all of these programs are great, and I love them all. Our program is different because if you are selected for a Boren, if you apply for a Boren, it's not only that you want to study abroad, and our goal is to get more people in the federal government who have these overseas experiences. So if you apply for Boren and receive the award and accept the award, you will then work for the federal government for at least a year. 12 months is the service agreement for most Boren after you graduate. So that's a lot to pack in. So let me break it down a bit. This program offers awards, and let me tell you what the top 5 languages are on our program. So I know I'm in the Latin American wing, so I should mention that Brazil is in our top 5. For us, Portuguese is considered a preferred language, a language that we would like people to apply for. Brazil is a preferred country in the world. We do go to Latin America. Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Mexico, these are all preferred countries as well, but the language of Spanish is not preferred on the Boren. And that's a bummer for some people. And I always say, well, it's the #1 language already spoken after English in the US, both in the US and also in the federal government. So it's not considered a priority. I'm going to learn a Spanish that I can in New Mexico or anywhere else in the US, that I'm going to be doing, maybe it's research, maybe I'm doing an internship, I'm doing some kind of special Spanish, I'm learning a jargon. maybe a professional level of Spanish I cannot get in a normal classroom. And this is going to prepare me for the job I want to do in the federal government. It is a very narrow line to walk, but it has been accomplished. We get a few Spanish awards every year, but it definitely isn't the norm. Most of the folks who have Spanish in their background, I say, the Boren is like, if you think of it as a river, you want to swim with the current, not against the current. Brazil is a preferred country. Portuguese is a preferred language. You need no background in Portuguese to apply. The committee sees your Spanish as an asset. We know that if you have learned Spanish, even if it's just intermediate Spanish, that you're going to pick up Portuguese at a faster clip than perhaps somebody without that Spanish background. So you become that becomes more of a positive in your application. But let's say you do want to go to Argentina, you do want to go to a different country. Then I would suggest studying an indigenous language. An indigenous language, although not preferred on the Boren, has better success than Spanish. First of all, you don't have to have any level of indigenous background. So you do not have to have already intermediate or advanced indigenous, like Quechua, for example. We are happy to have you start at absolute beginner. Most schools won't have an opportunity to learn that. Some do, some don't. But the idea is you have an interest in the language, an interest in that region. Your Spanish will actually improve, of course, because you're in a Spanish-speaking country surrounded by Spanish, but your goal is to learn that indigenous language. And then tell the committee, this is why these people are important. This is why this region of the world is important. And this experience is going to help me when I look for work in the federal government, whether it be a foreign service officer at State Department, maybe it's working at USAID, maybe it is a Peace Corps volunteer, whatever the job is, you're connecting it somewhat to that Boren experience. So that's my Latin American spiel. There are a lot of other continents that we go to, and there are programs that are out there. I have enough time to go over a few of those. Do you want me to go past Latin America? Is it okay?
Yes,
Okay.
that's absolutely fine.
So let me tell you our top 5 countries. I already told you Brazil, which is in our top 5. Number 5's position is actually shared by also Japan. So it's Japan and Brazil share our top 5 when it comes to language and country. Number 4, I'm going to go backwards like a good television show. Number 4 is Korean. So Korean is very popular on the Boren Award. Number 3 is in Kazakhstan is Russian. We have students studying Russian in a lot of areas, but Kazakhstan is number 1. It's Kyrgyzstan would be number 2. We don't go to Russia right now for obvious reasons. We don't go to Belarus. We don't go to Ukraine. So those are the 3 places we're not currently going. Then it's Arabic. Arabic is our number 2 most popular language. Jordan is our most popular country for Arabic, although Morocco and Oman are right there. And then number 1 by a mile is Taiwan and Mandarin. Taiwan, mostly, right now you can apply for China, but we haven't been sending folks to China because of the COVID lockdowns and the uncertainty. And really, we don't want a student to get stuck in China or stuck in their dorm or whatever, right? It's just bad news bears. So we have been saying, if you want to study Mandarin on Boren, you can go to Taiwan, or you can go to maybe Malaysia or Singapore. We actually have 2 people right now in Singapore studying Mandarin, but Taiwan, 55 students right now are studying Mandarin in Taiwan. So that's by far our number 1 language. What does that mean if you're somebody who's looking at a less popular language, right? If I'm looking at Vietnam and studying Vietnamese, or I'm looking at Hungary and studying Hungarian, am I in trouble because I'm not picking the popular language, Russian, or I'm not picking Mandarin, Japanese, or Korean? No. We look at diversity in many ways in Boren, and one of the things we look for is language diversity and country diversity. So I'm in the Asia panel. I'm a selection committee member, and most of my applications are for China, then Korea, then Japan. My 1 or 2 applications for other countries are going to seem more interesting, right? So it's like I could send my 13th person to China, or I could send our only applicant to Cambodia who had a strong applicant as well. So sometimes that will work in your favor. So I don't want to dissuade somebody from applying for something that they really want to do. So those are our popular programs. Now, how do we fund these? How do we pay for these things? Do we have our own programs? For everything I mentioned, no, we don't have our own programs. We are a scholarship for undergrads, a fellowship for graduate students. The goal for us is to give you money so you can pay the program that you are applying for. So if you're going through your study abroad office here at University of New Mexico, and you say to them, I really want to study Quechua, what program do I have? What programs are available? And you will say, oh, I have a program for you, and here's the information, and here's the money it costs. Then you're applying to Boren and saying, okay, here's the program my school offers. Here are the dates. Here's the cost. We ask you to make a national security argument for Peru or Ecuador or wherever it is you're going. And then you are saying, I need this amount of money to pay for it. The application is due in February. We let you know in April whether you received the award or not. And then the earliest you would go overseas would be summer 2023. That's generally how it works. So we're helping you pay for something. So we put money in your bank account so then you can pay for those programs. We do not pay directly to your program. We do not pay directly to University of New Mexico. It goes to you. And therefore, it's up to you to spend that money where you should be. $12,500 is about our limit for 12 to 24 weeks overseas. 12 weeks is the minimum if you are not a STEM major. If you are a science, technology, engineering, or math major, you can apply for a short 8 to 11 week program for about $8,000. Everybody else, 12 weeks is the minimum, 3 months. And then if you can stay overseas even longer, if you can stay overseas 25 weeks or longer, we consider that a full academic year, even though you're only really just hitting 6 months. But if you go 6 to 12 months, you can get up to $25,000. It's not immediate. It depends on what the cost of your program are. And for some programs, 25,000 may be enough. It may be too much. It may be not enough, but that's our limit. So if let's say you go to Tokyo to study Japanese and your program costs $30,000, we can give you up to 25. You're going to have to find that extra $5,000 somewhere else, if that makes sense. And if your program only costs $24,000, I'm not going to give you an extra $1,000 to play with. We will give you $24,000. It depends on what your budget is, but this is generally how it works. This program gets, on average, pre-COVID, I would get about 800 applications from my undergrads, and we give out about 200 awards every year, a little over 200 awards. The last couple of years, we've had a reduced number of applications. Most programs like mine have. Last year, we had about 550 applications, and we still gave out over 200 awards. I expect to be somewhere in the 600 range, knock on wood, this year. So think about that, 600 applications, 200 awards. This is an attainable program. And I already mentioned before that we look at diversity in different ways. And one of those was which country and language you're choosing, right? The other things that we look at, other than the student themselves, it was where is the student going to college? So when I did my research, I've been wanting to come to New Mexico for a long time, since 2017. Our numbers in Boren, getting applications, not just from University of New Mexico, but from the state in general, are very low. And I came here because I need to boost this state. I need to get more people from this state to apply. If you write a competitive application, and I'm in a selection committee, and I see, okay, you've applied for China or Taiwan. Your application is right neck and neck with this person from Georgetown or American University. These are schools in DC, where we already have 12 people. It's hard not to pick the person from a school we don't have a lot of applications from, or we didn't get any applications from, right? So that diversity factor right there helps you out just being from New Mexico, just going to school here. So that is one of the things I want to point out. We look at diversity in other ways as well. We look at the diversity of your background. Are you a first generation student? There are all sorts of things. Did you come out of a community college like I did? There are a lot of ways we look at this. But this is something that is, I want to make sure that you don't self-select out, that you don't decide, I shouldn't apply for this because I can't get this kind of award. anybody can get this award. You have basic eligibility requirements that I should have mentioned earlier, but I'm going to mention them now. You have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to maintain your student status at University of New Mexico. That means basically if you are about to graduate in May, you can't. So if you were applying for an undergrad and you were going to graduate in May 2023, I don't know the mechanisms involved, but you would have to postpone that graduation until you get back from your Boren. Some schools are okay with that, some schools are not. If you are a graduate student, you can't get your master's or PhD before you finish your Boren Award. The other requirement is that you can't be a dual citizen of the country you want to go to. So, my sons are Colombian American. They both have Colombian and United States citizenship, and they each have their own passports for both. They could not do a Boren in Colombia, but they could go to Ecuador, they could go to Argentina, they could go to Brazil. I would advise them to go to Brazil. But that is something that is also, you can't be a dual citizen of the country you plan to travel to. So that doesn't come up a lot, but it comes up sometimes. So I want to make sure that I point that out. So I mentioned the numbers for undergrads. I should say for graduate students, on average, we get 300 applications for the graduate program, and we get about 100 and change awards, usually 110, 120 awards. So that is also very attainable on a good year. We haven't had a good year application-wise. Last year, we had 242 applications for 120 awards. So this is the time to apply. This is the time to get in there. The programs all basically need to have a similar, I have a few more minutes. So the programs all have to have a basic similar language component. So we're looking for students who are studying, if you're an undergrad and you are new to the language, let's say you're studying Quechua, it's the first time. You want to be applying for a program that gives you a lot of language, 15, 20 hours a week. You can increase your ability to do this by not just taking more classes, but also maybe you can stay in a homestay in a family that speaks Quechua or this indigenous language or Portuguese or Japanese, wherever it is you're going. You can hire on extra tutoring if you think the program you want to go to doesn't have enough language. Maybe it only has 9 hours of language a week. You can supplement that. I'm going to get tutoring. I'm going to hire this and put that in your budget for the program so that you can pay for it. There are a lot of ways to do that, but the key is really the number one thing you could do to make yourself more competitive on my program is spend more time overseas. If you can do 15 weeks, but you can't do 16, 15 is fine. You can still apply. If you can do 20, apply for 20. If you can do 30, apply for 30 weeks. Really the higher, the better. And of course, if you get up to 25 weeks, you can then go for the entire 25,000. The deadline for this program for undergrads is February 1st, 3 p.m. your time. That is when you have to hit submit on your application. Once you start an application, you're going to actually probably get contacted by somebody at the school to say, hey, I see you started an application. If you have questions about it, let me know. If you have questions at all, you can, of course, contact me and I'll tell you what my email address is in a minute. What we don't, since we have so few applications, we are very hands-on with our applicants. So if you end up saying, I have questions about the Boren, I have questions about working for the federal government, I have questions in general, you can bring them to your campus representative or you can bring them to me, and I'm happy to answer them. When I get back today, I will answer a lot of questions about things like that. For example, somebody may say, hey, when was the last time somebody got an award for Quechua? And I can say, oh, that was 2020 or 2021 was the last time we awarded somebody for Quechua. How many people applied for Spanish, and what are the odds of me getting it? I can help you with these questions. The graduate deadline is January 25th. Both of these are Wednesdays, by the way, just if that matters at all, but also 3 p.m. Mountain Time. So this is something you have time to do, but at the same time, time is running out. It's almost Thanksgiving when we record this. Things that are beyond your control, I need 2 letters of recommendation. So that is asking somebody else to take time and write that. So you want to get started on that sooner than later. Your campus advisor may want to go over your application with you and just kind of take a quick look. These kinds of applications, whether it's a Boren, if it's a Gilman, if it's a CLS or a FLAS, you need to go through and make edits and do rewrites. And it sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but it's worth it. The folks that are successful in these programs usually go through a process like that. They do 5 or 6, maybe adjustments to their essays. The essays themselves are roughly 800 words each. They're not very big, 2 essays. We have webinars on our website at borenawards.org, which is what you see. You can kind of go through and check out the webinars about, how to make a competitive essay. What is the service agreement, and give me more information about that. That's all there. More importantly, my contact information, it's BOREN, so it's the name of the award, Boren, at IIE.org. That's Boren at IIE.org. That is our catch-all. There's, in theory, anybody can check that inbox. In reality, I'm the only one who does. So I'm happy. You can say, hey, Michael, I saw you on this recording. I have questions. Great. I will do my best to get you across the finish line and get you to apply for this program, because I really, really want more folks from this state to do it. And I really appreciate the time you gave me to make our pitch.
Thank you for coming here and giving this information to our student. So we're going to keep the questions towards the end of the event. So I'm going to present next on the FLAS, but we need a break to put up the slides. So now I'm going to present about the Foreign Language and Area Studies FLAS Fellowships, which is a program supported through a generous grant from the U.S. Department of Education. And right now at the University of New Mexico, it only covers the languages for Latin America. So if you're interested in Latin America, if you want to study Portuguese, Nahuatl, Quechua, I apologize, Yucatec Maya, I forgot the Yucatec there, very important, or any other indigenous language from Latin America, either at UNM or abroad, they are in the right place. And this is, the FLAS offer tuition funding and stipend to students who are interested in this language. And it's as I mentioned, it's supported through the Latin American and Iberian Institute. So what is the purpose of FLAS? So it's to encourage the study of less commonly taught modern foreign languages in combination with area studies or international aspects of professional studies. So a foreign language means that any language from Latin America except Spanish will be supported by FLAS. During the academic year, this means Nahuatl, Portuguese, Quechua, and Yucatec Maya, because these are the courses that we currently offer at our university. And during the summer, you can either study these languages or any other less commonly taught language, because normally our students take the summer funding to study these languages in Latin America. And what those area studies or international aspects of professional studies mean is that alongside you studying these languages, you'll be studying the society where these languages are spoken. So for us, obviously, it's Latin America and or the Caribbean if you're interested in taking, for example, Haitian Creole in the summer. Okay, so there are 2 types of FLAS fellowships, one for the academic year, which you do through coursework and approved UNM study abroad, or if you are at the graduate level, you can do dissertation research or writing during that academic year. The other type of FLAS is the Summer Fellowship, that is for intensive language study during summer, and you can do it here in the US or in Latin America. Okay. To be eligible for this fellowship, you have to be a US citizen, national or permanent resident. You have to be a full-time UNM student in any discipline. And you must have an interest or your focus of your study should be Latin America. For this fellowship is for current or incoming graduate students. Graduate students can study it at the beginning level of the language, but you must have advanced level knowledge of another Latin American language in order to study it at the beginning level. For most students, that is Spanish. At the undergraduate level, this opportunity is open to any current or transfer undergraduate student. But the caveat with undergraduate students that they need to have at least 1 year of the language to be eligible to apply. So that means that by the start of the fellowship, you should be at the intermediate level of the language. This fellowship does not fund native speaker of the language for obvious reason. The purpose is to help students again obtain proficiency in the language. So if you're near native level fluency, you're already at the lowest priority for this fellowship. However, heritage speakers are eligible to apply because normally they're speaking the language at home, but most heritage speakers, they don't know much about their grammar or other skills that you get through coursework. So if you get the FLAS for the academic year, you will be asked to maintain full-time registration. That is 12 credits for undergraduate students and 9 credits for graduate students. You must enroll each semester in fall and spring for a language course that it's at least 3 credits or more. And you also need to enroll in an area studies course that also is at least 3 credits or more in both fall and spring semester. Your language instructor will be asked to submit a pre and post language assessment. And then at the end of the tenure of your fellowship, you'll be asked to fill out a report that goes directly to the U.S. Department of Education. And the purpose is for you to report on the grades that you obtain and also the whole experience of the FLAS. And the U.S. Department of Education will also do post-graduation career tracking at least 4 times after the completion of your degree. And if you obtain this fellowship for summer, there are similar requirements in terms of reporting and pre and post proficiency evaluation, but there are some specific requirements for the summer program. It has to be an intensive language program that is equivalent to 1 academic year of studying the language here at UNM. The minimum length of the program is 6 weeks. And it has to fulfill certain minimum contact hours. That is the time that you spend in the classroom studying the language. So for beginning and intermediate level, that is 140 hours of contact hours. And then for advanced, that is third year or above, that's 120 hours. So how much money do you get through these fellowships? So for graduate students, you get a stipend, a general stipend of $20,000. And then you get up to $18,000 in tuition and fees, plus health insurance. For undergraduate students, fees, you get a stipend of $5,000 and up to 10. And for summer fellowships, the stipend is, and then the fellowship covers up to $5,000 in tuition and fees, and it may provide a travel award of up to $1,000. So how to apply for these fellowships? There will be 2 applications, one for the academic year and one for summer. And both will be due on February 22nd, and you should submit all the materials by 11:59 Mountain Time. And the materials that you need to submit will be an application form, which will be available on our student funding webpage, and I put there the address. So it'll be available on November 30th. You need to submit your unofficial transcripts, your CV or resume, 2 letters of recommendation from faculty members, and one of those letters should be submitted by a language instructor or someone with the language expertise to evaluate your skill, either in the language you're applying for, or who can talk about your experience learning a language. This is especially the case for graduate students who want to study the proposed FLAS language at the beginning level. Those students, they will be evaluated, let's say in Spanish or any other language that they have acquired. You also need to submit a statement of purpose, which should be 2 or 3 pages long. And this is a very important piece of the application, because that's where you explain to the fellowship committee, why do you need to study this language and how this language will help you obtain your career goals or succeed in your professional stage once you graduate from UNM. We also require students to submit the Office of Financial Aid's need analysis form, because need is one of the priorities, and I explained that later on in a slide. And if you're applying for summer, you'll be asked to submit budget information for the program you're applying for. So the priorities, so we make these awards based on academic merit above all. That's why it's important for us to know your grade point average and other honors that you've received throughout your journey at UNM. We also look at the relevance of studying the proposed language and how Latin American studies fit within your academic and career goals. We also look at financial need, but that's like, if everything is equal among 2 candidates, then we give preference to students who demonstrate financial need. We also give privilege to students in professional schools or STEM fields, and those students in any discipline who are interested in a career in government service, business, education, and the nonprofit sectors. And these are areas of national needs defined by the U.S. Department of Education. And as I mentioned, the deadline is also on Wednesday, February 22nd, by 11:59 p.m. And here's my contact information. I know I've covered a lot of information, but feel free to email me or make an appointment with me, and I'll guide you through the process. And I think now we can take questions for both the Boren and the FLAS Fellowships, if we have questions.
No pressure, but you should have brought my shill.
I have.
Oh, I have my shill. Yes, sir.
So for the FLAS,
Mhm.
at the undergraduate level, it awards up to $10,000 for tuition.
Yes.
How is that affected by students who have the lottery or opportunity scholarship and their tuition is already covered?
Yes, but that means we will have more money to offer the award to other undergraduate students.
Okay, so if a student has a lottery and an opportunity, they wouldn't get a tuition?
They wouldn't get the tuition, but they get the
They get
stipend.
stipend, okay.
Mhm.
For the Boren, are individuals able to double dip in the sense like, can they do Boren and CLS? Can they do Boren and Gilman? Can they do Boren, CLS, Gilman, and FLAS?
So for the Boren Award, it's funny because you use the term double dip. And we actually use that in our parlance when it comes to something we do not allow. But it's Boren. It depends on the student. It depends on and today was the last day to apply for that. But there are a list of languages that you could apply for. Some required no background, some required a year, some required 2. It depends on the student, it depends on foreign. Most of our languages, only Spanish and French do we require you to have any background. Everything else you can be an absolute beginner, but let's just say everything lines up perfect. And you are applying for the Boren for summer 2023 or summer 2024 if you're seeing this down the road. And you're applying for CLS, which is also a summer program. You can apply to both, and I recommend you do. It's good to put your hat in as many rings as possible. So I say, okay, I'm applying for a Boren. Summer 2023 through December 2023, right? I'm applying for CLS, throwing my hat into both rings here. Now, good news, I got both. I've been offered both awards. Boren is more than happy to say, all right, we know you're already going with State Department to that country. We will start your Boren a little later. In fact, we'll start it the day after your CLS ends. We will co-share you with State Department, and we're happy to do that. CLS we have a track record of this. We've done this many times. So that's fine. Gilman could be fine as well. When we say we don't double dip, that refers more to, let's say, CLS is paying for your airline ticket to, Azerbaijan or Turkey or wherever it is. We are not going to then also give you money for your airline ticket to Turkey because you already got that money. That is what we consider double dipping, where you just pocket the $1,500 money. If you are doing a Boren Award for months, you're for the 20 CLS, your Boren perhaps is now less than 25 weeks because your CLS took up the summer program, which you're getting funding for, but now your Boren is 1 semester. So you're limited to 12,500. Ideally, that shouldn't matter because you're getting the money from State Department. But if you didn't want to lose that funding, we are also more than happy to take your 6-month block and just start it, move the whole thing over to end of August when your CLS would end. And instead of coming home in December, maybe you come home in March. You're still hitting that 25 weeks or more. You still have opportunity to take home, to take that 25,000. So we're flexible on that. A normal student, a normal Boren awardee who applies for a 6-month program and tells us that they can only do a 3-month program will not be allowed to do that unless they have something like a CLS or a Gilman or something else that's paying them, right? And the reason being is time overseas, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the biggest things you can do to make yourself more competitive on the award. And if somebody tells us they can do 12 months and then says, not really, I can only do 3, we call that's a bait and switch, whether it was intentional or not. In general, we will say, no, you can't do that. Either take the 12 or decline the award. Exceptions are made for programs when we know you're already overseas. So it's not like you're trying to pull something over on us. And ideally, again, you're overseas, you're getting that experience. You're still getting have the 12-month service agreement. Everybody wins as far as I'm concerned. Good question.
Yeah, for FLAS, we also don't allow students to double dip, especially at the federal level. It's more flexible if you have a state grant or a graduate assistantship for students. We allow students to hold up to, 0.25 FTE during the academic year. So working 10 hours a week, that's allowable. Let's say an undergraduate student has a Pell Grant. It's a federal program. So we will make sure that the FLAS, if the Pell Grant is covering for tuition, if we have a grant or a state grant, then there wouldn't be any issue. Of course, we want these funds to support as many students as possible. And when we don't cover something, that means that funding is available for other students. And when we make awards, we also have a list of alternates. So when we're deciding on the funding, we go down the alternate list, and oftentimes we're able to make more awards than initially anticipated for.
I do have a question. Something about like the which overseas programs might qualify for the Boren Award, because there's a school that does a Tzotzil immersion, but it's a Zapatista school, and so they do accreditation through several organizations within the United States, but they don't hold their own accreditation. And I'm wondering if that program will qualify at all.
So one of the rules of the Boren as a undergrad or graduate student, so those of you who are undergrads at University of Mexico are qualified because of that, as long as you stay a student at University of New Mexico. As a graduate student, you still have to be in a U.S. graduate school to qualify for the fellowship. So if you are studying abroad, though, at a unaccredited university or just doing a language, like a private language school, that's fine for Boren as long as you're still a student here in the U.S. We don't really have any rules about that. Now, your school may have a rule about that, but we don't. So, for example, if you go to Mexico, you could go to a state university, something that is accredited up and down, and that's fine. Or you could go to a private language school that is just for-profit business in somewhere in Mexico, and that is also fine as long as the language is involved. So we're happy either way.
And I can follow up and answer that. As a study abroad student at the University of New Mexico, following through the process, you will be registered for a study abroad course. It's called ISEP 888 or ISEP 999. At the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference which one. It tells the computer system if you're paying UNM tuition directly or if you're paying a university abroad or an organization abroad directly. But what it does is it maintains your status at the University of New Mexico as an undergraduate or a graduate student for full time. So it triggers all of your financial aid that you would typically get in a regular semester. It keeps you an active student in the system. You still receive access to all the resources that the university has to offer. You're still able to register for courses the following term, just like you normally would. Like everything that normally happens will continue to happen through that registration. And that's where what Michael's talking about with the Boren, like for example, we have a couple programs in the Arabic speaking world that are not technically accredited university programs, but the Arabic program here approves their courses to count as UNM credit because we just don't have a lot of options in the Arabic speaking world. We don't have a lot of exchanges there. Some of the regions of the Arabic speaking world are just off limits to a lot of our students because of health and safety policy here at UNM. So there's ways to maneuver the system a little bit to ensure that you would still fall into those qualified categories from the institutional standpoint.
Mm-hmm. So for FLAS, it's the same. You will be required to be enrolled through UNM if you go to study at a not a pre-approved FLAS program in Latin America. But then I need to do more steps with the program officer in Washington, D.C. I will need to submit the CV of the faculty teaching the language, a syllabus, just to make sure that it covers the minimum of contact hours. But it's very simple process, and most of the time they're approved, or in my experience, all the times they are approved.
And I think that's where the study abroad office can also support you because we can help you identify institutions that you may or may not be aware of. We have a set list of exchanges, we have a set list of partners, but if none of those work for you, we have the entire network of universities globally that we can tap into through other institutions, other organizations to kind of guide you to what you want to do. So particularly for some of these languages that are not widely spoken, they're highly regional, they're very specific. We may not have something in the Yucatan, for example, but we know other organizations in the university that do. And so that will create access. So don't let our list of approved study abroad programs in that network stop you from looking at specific languages in specific regions of the world, because even if we don't list it, we know how to get you there.
Any other questions? Well, I had a question for you
Sure.
regarding this career requirement that Boren has,
Sure.
and how does that work once the student come back after the
Perfect.
language training?
So the Boren Award is for students, and there is that 12-month service agreement that's tied to it. In your application, you will talk about where ideally you would find yourself working in the federal government. So if that's Foreign Service Officer at State Department, or if it is somebody who wants to work at the Department of Homeland Security, in FEMA, whatever it is. You go into detail in your application about the reasons why you want to do it. You talk about how long, kind of a long-term interest in federal work is always more appreciative than saying, I'm going to do 12 months and then get out. That is the reality of the application. The reality of actually looking for work in the federal government could be a lot different. So you get back from overseas. You are about to graduate. You're going to start getting emails from the Boren team, from the government side of the program. It's an office called NSEP, National Security Education Program, also under Delencio. A lot of acronyms. It's DC. It's what we do. And they will say, hey, you're back. You have 3 years to fulfill your service, unless you go directly to graduate school or get your master's, get a PhD, or you go, business school, law school, whatever. You can defer. But let's just say you're done with your education. Now you have 3 years, 2 if you were a graduate student if you did a fellowship. But basically, you have 3 years to start working for the federal government. We are going to start sending you links and blurbs about, hey, here's an opportunity at DHS. Here's an opportunity at DOD. Here's an opportunity with the FBI in the intelligence community. Here's an opportunity at Peace Corps. Everything that we will send you will be will fulfill your service. That's why we're sending it to you. Some of those jobs are only for Boren. They're called exclusives. Some of those jobs are open for everybody in the federal government who has access to them, former or current employees of the federal government. But they have told us they want Boren, so they want us to make sure Boren know it exists. But that you're not limited to these opportunities. You can go out on your own to USA Jobs. You can go to, which is a website for looking for work in the government, usajobs.gov. Or you can go to a federal hiring event in New Mexico. You don't have to work in DC. You don't have to work overseas. You can work here in New Mexico. You can work anywhere in the country. It is somewhere, I think it's 2 or 3% of US government jobs are overseas, and most of that's the military. The vast majority of jobs are in the United States, and only 17% of federal jobs are in DC, the DMV, DC, Virginia, Maryland. This is something that I think if you were interested in government work, but not interested in moving to the East Coast or anywhere else, you're fine. There are a lot of opportunities. I mean, you could work at TSA at the airport, and that would be a Department of Homeland Security job, right? There are opportunities out there. People who are flexible will have no trouble finding work through Boren. We give you hiring authorities that allow you to apply to jobs that I can't apply to. I've never been a federal employee. I work for the Institute of International Education, which is a nonprofit. I'm a contractor with DOD, but I am not a federal employee. So when I went to usajobs.gov, half of those jobs I wouldn't be able to apply to because I'm not a current or former employee of the federal government. So we give you these opportunities, we put these in front of you, but ultimately you are the one that has to apply, that has to interview, that has to accept a position. We ask you to apply, we say a good faith effort, somewhere between 10 and 20 jobs within our priority agencies, Department of Defense, Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, and the intelligence community. After that, you could work in Peace Corps, you could work at Commerce, possibly even DOE, Department of Education, if that job has a national security angle to it. And then these are things, again, in your job search reality, not what you write in your application. Your application is a different beast, and we have strategies about that. But it is good to know that you could even be a contractor like myself and work for the federal government that way. So even though I'm not a federal employee, what I'm doing today would count toward my service. Because I am getting a check through the DOD, even if it's from DOD to IIE to me, that still technically works for my, if I had a fellowship, if I had a service agreement. So generally speaking, there are a lot of ways to peel that potato. I would say though, it's not guaranteed. And you have 3 years as an undergrad to find work. And once you're done your education, you have 2 years as a graduate student. They give you 2 more years, both of those, if you're having trouble finding work in the federal government. So, you could have up to 5 years as an undergrad or 4 years as a grad. Ultimately, though, if you have not been able to fulfill the service, you will have to repay the award. And it doesn't happen a lot. It's less than 5% over the last 29 years, but it is something that you should be aware of. Again, if you're flexible, this shouldn't be an issue. But if you only want to be a foreign service officer and that's the only job you will accept, it could be tough because it's hard to get into the foreign service, right? It's usually you want to get your foot in the door in state, which we can help you with, and then you work your way to getting into that foreign service. But that is something we're here to help. We have actually a hiring fair. We bring all of our recent returnees, well, we invite them all to come to DC in September. We host a 2-day event, goes over what it's like to apply in the federal government, what a background investigation is, all sorts of things, how to write a resume for a federal job, how it differs from writing a resume for a normal job. And then the day 2 is a job fair. We bring in 20 to 30 agencies and sub-agencies, and they set up their tables similar to the study abroad fair I was at today. And you go around talking to different agencies. You'll talk to the ones you were interested already, State Department maybe, but you'll then see agencies you've never heard of and sub-agencies you've never heard of before and be like, what is this? What's DIA? Or what is the U.S. Passport Agency, right? That counts toward my service? Oh, man, right? So there are going to be a lot of opportunities that you didn't even know about. That is what we're trying to do. Again, the goal of this program is get more people in the federal government. We don't want you to repay the award. That's just not doing any of us any good. We want you to be in federal government. That's the purpose of this program. So we do our best to get your foot in the door.
Thank you. That concludes our event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.